Welcome, welcome. This is Val, and I am super excited to welcome Hashondra Smith. She is an author, she's a speaker, she is a certified life coach. But what she says really is she's all about being a life consultant, which is why I thought that she would be such a great fit for you guys, our audience. So, Hashondra has a really interesting past for sure. I mean, over the last 20 years, her voice has been heard by millions of people worldwide. She is the co-owner of a group called the Pink Group, which is a branding and marketing team. She is the brains behind the project called Don't Overthink Me, LLC. And you will find Hashondra at hashondra.me. That's HASHONDRA.me. Hashandra's life has had lots of interesting things that happened to her. She was became a teen mom, now had her own child when she was 18 years old, and then a second child at 27 years old. She herself has gone through the separation and divorce process. And she's also the founder, and it's interesting, she founded this project during her own divorce process, which is called MAD, M-A-D, Manifest a Deliverance Foundation. So welcome, Hashondra. I'm so glad you could join me today.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
So glad to have you. Tell me a little bit about your background in terms of, so when you were talking about the Don't Overthink Me, can you explain to the audience what you mean by that, and then how that relates to separation and divorce?
So Don't Overthink Me, LLC, it means don't overthink yourself out of being yourself. And as we live in society today, so many times we are overthinkers. We overthink the process of divorce. We overthink the process of marriage. We just overthink ourselves so much that we sometimes just linger away from actually just being, just living in the moment, living in the present, understanding who we are. And one thing that I like to tell people, there's three things that I do every single day. I talk to myself, I listen to myself, and I grace myself. And the reason that that has helped me during my separation process and going through my divorce and just becoming who I am today is because I had to get to understand who Hashondra was. I had to get all the voices out of my head that was playing in my head and say, first of all, we can't listen to mama, we can't listen to daddy, we can't listen to the TV, we can't listen to social media. Who are you? What do you want? So I had to figure that out and then grace myself in the process of figuring that out. So when we're going through those trying times and those transitional periods, we just need to take time to just be in those still moments for a minute and really figure out what we want to do and who we are as individuals.
So this is really powerful. And so when you were saying, like, to talk and listen to yourself. So one of the things that we know is that if we're going through the separation and divorce process, we have no end of well-meaning friends, family giving us terrible advice, social media, terrible advice. I mean, just good advice out there too, for sure. And so if you could share with me, how long ago did you get divorced? What age were you when you went through that process, Hashondra?
So I actually was 33 when I went through my divorce. And it took quite a while. I was 32 when we separated, but I was 33 when the divorce was finalized. And it took quite a bit of time because the person I was married to didn't want to sign the divorce papers. So not only did I have to kind of figure out life and transition through the process of still being attached, I had to just move forward and literally wait around what I call my signature of freedom. So that was very difficult. That really affected my mood at times. It really depressed me at times. And the best birthday gift I got, because he actually signed the papers on my birthday, my 33rd birthday, the best birthday gift I got was that signature. And I call it my signature of freedom.
Now, Let me ask you this. So in your jurisdiction, somebody actually has to sign to agree to get divorced?
Yes, we had a
And
uncontested divorce, and I had to, at that time, I left my marriage with $37. I left my marriage with my 2 kids and our clothes. When I say I left everything, I left everything. So I had to find resources to assist me with getting divorced. And I went through the Georgia legal services, and they did my divorce for free, but he had to comply with everything.
right. And so when you said you left with your 2 children and $37, how old were your children when you left that marriage?
So my youngest daughter was 5, and my oldest daughter, she was 13.
Did you have family support when you left, or were people telling you to stick it through, or what was happening there?
Thankfully, my mother was very supportive through the whole time. Me and my
Yay,
girls,
mom.
we ended up staying with my mother for 6 months. It took me quite a while to reestablish. I was a housewife, so I didn't have a job.
Yeah.
It was no funds. I've always done hair. I'm a stylist or a braider. So I've always done hair, and that's always been like my extra money, my bread and butter, and just,
Mhm.
little odd jobs that I would do to help people. But he was the sole financial provider for our family. So when I left, that's exactly how much I had in my bank account after when I
Right. And
left that day.
so, and when we do the math, that was only 5 years ago, isn't it?
Yes.
And you've done a lot in the last 5 years, as far as I can see.
It's hard to believe that it was 5 years ago. And one thing that I do is I look back on the journey when I'm having difficult times in my present moments, just to say, hey, this was only a year ago, or this is only 2 years ago.
Yeah.
But the most important thing that I did, or yes, that I did, and that I also encourage other people to do, is to create a plan. I made a 7-year plan of what I wanted to achieve each and every year. So in the nonprofit that I founded called MAD, or Manifest Deliverance Foundation, in January each year, we have our goal planning meeting. So I make
Mhm.
sure that I plan out my life through the goal planning meeting, but on a personal level, I also made a plan for 7 years. So almost there. I'm almost there.
And I put a peg in one thing and I want to come back to it, but you've really piqued my interest here. And so, in terms of that 7 year plan, and I really like, so a lot of times when we have goals, and which is great because you want to have this plan, you want to be looking towards that horizon to, what's going to be happening that's great in your life moving forward, etc. And a lot of times people get frustrated because they're like, well, this hasn't happened yet, this hasn't happened yet. But yet, if you look at the gain of where you've come from and what you have accomplished in the past years, you kind of go, wait, you know what? A lot has happened. So, in terms of that 7 year plan, and you're a couple years away, I think, got a couple more years to go based on that original plan. Where are you in terms of like, have things gone according to plan, or have there been some things that have gone well, some not so well, or how has that all panned out so far?
So honestly, I have accomplished everything that I've placed on my paper in my plan. There is only one thing that I have not accomplished, and that's weight loss.
Isn't that always the way, right?
When I left the marriage, I was 199 pounds. I was very unhealthy. I have gotten down to 140. I've gained some pounds because I've recently had a hysterectomy, but I pretty much obtained most of the goals, or all of the goals except weight loss.
Right. But I'm looking at you right now and you look like a very vibrant, healthy person. And so you're not 199 pounds now though, are you?
Not at all.
Yeah, no, you look very, very healthy to me. And so now that you have accomplished most virtually all of your 7 year plan, have you created a new plan to keep moving forward, or what's this strategy there?
It's funny you should ask that. The other night, I was actually contemplating if I should go ahead and re-strategize on the plan and extend it. But I have made the decision to just keep it how I have it, keep the goals the way that I have them now, and just wait out the 7 years. I really want to complete the goals without, pushing myself any harder than I have to. And that goes into bracing myself, just having that
Yes.
time to say, hey, even if you don't achieve this, let's see how far you can get. My next goal on my list is land ownership. I want to
Mhm.
own farmland. So that's the next big goal on my list. So this year it's all about financial gain, And the last year was about eliminating credit debt and, just making sure that my businesses were the way they're supposed to be. We 501c3 the organization of MAD last year. I LLC'd my business last year. So, and the first year, just if I can back up a little bit, was simply about healing. It was about healing and health, just getting my mental together and getting my body together because I needed to live for my kids and for myself.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned this gracing yourself, because that's really stood out to me when you mentioned it before, when you said you wanted to talk to yourself, you listen to yourself, and then you want to grace yourself. And so, and then what you're saying here is that, even though, instead of continuing to push forward, that you're just going to allow, even though it's only 5 years since you created your 7-year plan, you're going to allow that couple of years to kind of unfold gracefully, I guess is what you're saying, right? And tell me about gracing yourself. Like it sounds like it's just allowing yourself a chance to be where you are. And when you were on this journey, like just post separation, you have the $37, if that, you're living with your mom, got the 2 kids, I'm sure that's pretty overwhelming and scary at times. And what did gracing yourself look like during that time period?
Gracing myself, and this is going to be, I think this is the ultimate example. And I had to explain this to someone the other day. My mom stayed in a 1-bedroom apartment.
Mm-hmm.
So it's me, my oldest daughter, my youngest daughter, and my mother. She had a laundry room that she wasn't using. She just had some things that she had stored away. I took the things out of her laundry room and I put them in the attic. And those 30-gallon tubs, she had 3 of them. I left them down there. I made this bed. I went to the store. I had like $10 on me. I bought this little rack. I put my clothes in on the rack. And I used one of her side dresser drawers out of her room and put it in the laundry room. And that was my dresser at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I lay there and I said, you know what? I'm done. I'm not going back this time. I don't care if I have to sleep on the floor. This is it. We're not doing this. So as I lay there, that's when I first graced myself. That was my first light bulb moment where I
Mm-hmm.
allowed myself some grace. I was like, listen, the lifelong 20-year journey wasn't your story. It's okay. This is where you are. Take it in. You could be on the streets. You could be dead. You could, there's a lot of things that could be happening right now that's not. Just embrace this moment. Use this time to plan. Use this time to heal. And that was my first moment where I just started to allow myself grace. Everything
That's
wasn't your fault,
really,
but just allowing myself grace.
yeah, that's beautiful. And it sounds like there's the grace and also is really highly connected to being grateful. Just the gratitude for where you are, because it's often easy when we're going through a transition and things are freaky. I mean, one of the things I always say to my clients when they're going through a separation is, okay, you know what the story is, you know what's happened, right? You already have an understanding of what that looks like, what your home life looks like, what your marriage looks like, what family life looks like. You've got that picture. And often when people are leaving their relationship, they look in front of them and they're going, there's no picture. They don't know what that picture looks like. And that can be very scary. And it can often make people go, well, maybe it wasn't so bad. And he said sorry, or she said sorry, depending on, and then we end up, back potentially in that relationship. And so when you said, I'm not going back this time, was that something that happened for you where you kind of left and came back more than once, that kind of process?
Oh, I left and came back a number of times.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Time after time, over and over. But in my particular situation, I was actually a survivor of domestic violence. And I also like to tell people it wasn't just a one-sided thing. We were back at it at each other all the time. And it just got to a position where it was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't be this person. And I would always shield and protect them because of just image. So like I tell people, my main issue in that situation wasn't, oh my gosh, I can't leave. I had to get over the pride in myself of saying my marriage failed. And it took me a while just to admit that. And once I got over me, then I got over the marriage. And like you were talking about that story, I started rewriting my story. I wrote the book, I started the nonprofit, and those things also helped me in the process because it gave me accountability. Now I have these other women who's been looking up to me who didn't even know I was in a domestic violence situation. They're looking at me now. I don't have a choice but to go forward, not just for myself, not just for my children, but for the people who look up to me.
Right. And you mentioned the book. What's the name of that book, Hashondra?
If you like what you see here, hit that like button and hit the subscribe button so you will be kept apprised of every time I release a new video. And last but not least, if you want to leave a comment, be sure to do so because I will always respond.
The original book is called Attached. It was my journey of how I lost my virginity and the emotional trauma that it caused in my life. So last year, I released my second book, Unattached, the Final Season, and it's my 20-year journey of discovering me in the area of romantic love and the authentic me in the area of romantic love. So Unattached
Beautiful.
actually has the book attached inside of it.
Oh, beautiful. And it's so interesting because we have, I mean, I know myself, I was with my husband for 18 years and he, originally was quite nice to me, but then, year 10 or 11, he just flipped, and I mean, even though he'd get mad at me for a few days every month and I'd never understand why, because he'd never talk about it. He would just he'd go from being quite adoring to all of a sudden he hates my guts. And then he would just come back. And then one time he just didn't, right? And then I went through it took me 8 years to pull it together to say, God, this isn't going to work, right? And finally, I always say I didn't leave my marriage. I was constructively dismissed. He made it hell, right? But then made it, kind of was very passive aggressive, it was very abusive. And meanwhile, I'm this, superpower in my law firm and, do really great work for clients, etc. And meanwhile, I come home to this brutal family experience, which of course I'm not happy that I taught my daughter that was okay to live that way, And for me, I come from a family where people really don't give up on their marriages. And, I've got 4 older sisters and an older brother. And I mean, 2 of my sisters are with the quote unquote new guys, and that's been 30 years. The same with my brother, they've been together a long time, right? And in those situations, but of course, they're all pretty, they have their little, spats or bits and bobs or whatever, but they're pretty, they like each other and respect each other, right? And so for me, I was really hung up. To me, it was to be such a failure. I felt like I was such a failure to actually accept that my marriage was over and there was nothing I could do about it. I really tried, but it takes 2 to tango in terms of wanting to transform, and that wasn't going to happen at that end. I was always going to be that person's scapegoat. And so I really understand that, in terms of being prideful about not wanting to admit that, hey, this didn't work. Mm-hmm. Now, when you left your husband, and my understanding is that your older child, that's from your teenage days, and the 5-year-old at the time, that was your husband's daughter, right?
Correct.
And tell me, how did that go with the children? What's the plan there? Were you, when you said you went through the divorce, help my listeners with this, is that where I live, the divorce is a piece of paper that says you're no longer married anymore. But then there's the other stuff, which is sometimes it's a court order, but a lot of times it comes by way of an agreement, a separation agreement. It's okay, here's the dividing assets, here's the parenting plan, here's support, if any. When you mentioned your divorce, was that the piece of paper that said you're no longer married, or did it encapsulate all those other things?
It actually had some stipulations of visitation with my youngest daughter because we were married when I had her.
Yeah.
So of course, even now to this day, he still has partial custody. And then he also has power of attorney with certain medical issues. But other than that, in my personal situation, I didn't have a whole lot of drama because when it comes to my children, I am just iron fist.
Yeah.
So I just knew that wasn't going to be a big issue for me. I just made sure, one thing that I did make sure, I made sure that my children never lost contact with their fathers. Yeah. I never told them, hey, you can't see them. I just asked them or made it very clear, when you see them, this is what's going to happen, because I'm uncomfortable in certain situations. So we're going to have to operate it like this. I'll meet you halfway, but it's going to be that halfway mark. And if you go over your boundaries, then there's nothing. And if we need to take this to court, we will. So I've always stood firm as a
Mhm.
mother with
Yeah.
protecting my children. And I also had to learn as a parent to grace myself and also to grace my children. Because as we was
Yeah.
transitioning, they missed some school because of the violence. You know, my oldest daughter, she went through a series of just being real depressed, that she didn't want me to be married anymore. It was just a lot that was transpiring. And now they're just healthy and blossoming. My 18-year-old, she went to college at 17. She
Wow.
graduated under the nonprofit. My youngest daughter, she's homeschooled. She's also an author. She's a three-time author. She has a book series called Let's Be Friends. She has some products that she sells, Croc Jewels. She's a performer. So, you know, my children have just blossomed, but I had to blossom in order to show them that example.
Yeah, I mean, and that's really great because we can tell our kids as much as we want to tell them about what they should and shouldn't do, blah, blah, blah. But how they really learn from us is by watching and living with us, you know, and that's great. So they see you blossom, and it sounds like they're doing great, which is amazing. Now, when you first went through the separation process with your husband, were either of them angry with you or blaming of you at any point? Like, did you? I mean, we know that, you know, when there's conflict between the parents, that impacts the kids, obviously. So was there
Mhm.
any of that, or were they relieved? Like, where were they at in terms of that continuum?
Now, my oldest was angry. She was mad. We
Yeah,
had to really have those honest conversations. I'm
yeah,
like, hey, y'all, this is where we are. How do y'all feel? And I always ask my children all the time, and I ask them, you know, way before the divorce, even while we were married, how do you feel about what's going on in our situation? How do you feel about your home life? Because my oldest daughter, she went to live with my grandparents for a while because that's who she grew up with. I was young, I was off at college, so she grew up with my grandparents and my mother. So she
yeah,
went back to live with them for a while, but I was like, you know, I want you with me. And it was like back and forth. And
yeah.
even after we got situated about 2 years ago, she still had that anger built up in her. And she went
Hmm.
and lived with her dad for a year. And that was very tough for me. I just really had to calm down and tell myself, you got to let her work through it. You know,
Yeah,
even if she can't work through it with you, she needs to work through it with someone. And
it's
that's
about,
where,
yeah.
as a
Sorry.
mother, I really had to step back and say, I might be the person to help other people's children, but I might not be the person to help my own. There might be someone else that can do a better job at reaching them. And I had to step back and allow someone else to reach my children until my voice was one that they can hear so they can find their own voice and understand who they are as individuals. Because that's very big in my house. Just understanding yourself, getting to know yourself, believe in what you believe. Even our spiritual views are different in my house, but I have to allow them to grow.
Yeah. And it's so important to allow them to go through that anger, disappointment, whatever they're feeling about the separation in their own way, and giving them the space and respect for that. I know in the research I've done, like, that is the way to do it. Even, of course, there are babies and we want to make sure, you know, we want to make it better for them. And that's not our job, right? That's not our journey, that's their journey. So
Yes,
good for you for allowing her to have the space. And my hunch is that if you had hung onto her and not allowed her to have that space, your relationship wouldn't be in the place it is right now.
correct. Because now she's calling mom, mom. You know, it's like, how do I wash the rug off my floor at college? Why is laundry detergent so high? So our relationship is a lot different. And now that it's just me and my youngest daughter at home, you know, our relationship is growing even more. She she pretty much used a lot of poetry, music, her creative gifts to get through the process. She's just always been really happy. I've always just told her, hey, your father loves you. He's just going through some things. We're going through some things, but that does not mean that our love has decreased or depleted for you. Even though we may not love each other the same way that we did, We just kept
Yeah.
telling her, we love you.
Yeah.
So that had to be a big thing that was in her ear
Yeah.
to make her
Yeah.
blossom. And just having that support system helped as well.
Oh yeah, that's so great. Yeah, and I'm so glad that that's happened for you. So now imagine somebody who's listening to this and they're in it. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, you know, sometimes when you're really, really stressed out and you're like in it, like, you know, like I know for me, when I was going through my separation process, like I was, before we got an agreement, I was very stressed. And it's almost like I couldn't see more than a few feet in front of me because I was so freaked out, you know? And for you, like, imagine, you know, someone who's listening right now and they're going through this same thing, right? Like they're going through the, oh my gosh, how am I ever going to get through this? What would you share with them that could help them kind of move forward? Or what would be your pearl of wisdom, Hashondra?
That's a great question. One thing that I usually tell people who are in very high stress situations, especially when it comes to being connected with another person,
Yeah.
is to disconnect that person, focus on yourself, and see if there's someone that you can live without. And usually, when you disconnect that person and you just focus on yourself, you notice that honestly, you can live without them. You just got to figure out how to live without them. So it's not that they're just a whole part of your life that you can't dismiss. It's that dismissing them out of your life is going to make you do some work. So are you scared of the dismissal or are you scared of the work? And that's a
Right.
that we have to ask ourselves, and we have to answer it honestly. If you can honestly answer that question and say, okay, I'm scared of the work. I don't want to leave because I'm scared to do the work. I'm scared to start over. I'm scared of digging within me and figuring out why I even want to stay. If you're
Mhm.
scared of that, that can be worked on. Now you understand the core, what I call the core of your issue. Now, if you just can't live without that person, the route that I would encourage people to take is to increase your self-love. Because once you increase your self-love and you define in yourself what self-love is, and that relationship isn't healthy for you, and that self-love is increased, you're going to be pushed spiritually, mentally, and even physically to leave that situation. So just being
Right.
honest with yourself, really,
And we
really
don't,
being honest with yourself, disconnecting, focusing, and asking those hard questions and answering them honestly.
and how would you say, like, I always want to know, okay, like, what were the methods? Like, you mentioned having that self-talk, that grace. Were there other things that you did physically to, like, or action-wise to, like, to connect with yourself, to give yourself that self-love, that self-appreciation?
So one thing that I do continuously is affirmations. Even those nights where I was crying and I was stressed out, I was still like, I am strong. I can do this. I am more than a conqueror. I am the head and not the tail. I am rich. I am healthy. I am wealthy. I am whole. And I kept saying those things. And all in the back of my head, it was like, girl, you lying, you broke. You live with your mama. You don't have a key to your name. You don't have a car. Like you have nothing. But I was like, no, I am healthy. I'm wealthy. I'm whole. I'm capable. I'm creative. I need to use this creativity. So I was speaking out loud the things that I wanted to be, even though I wasn't. So that's a powerful tool that I absolutely use every day. Even with getting out of my bed in the morning, I just have to wake up, put a smile on my face, and I talk to myself. Even if I'm not feeling the best, I'm still talking to myself. So that's the most powerful tool that I use beyond listening to myself and talking to myself and gracing myself. Those are like daily things that I do.
Wow, that's beautiful. So your affirmations, listening to yourself, talking to yourself, then listening, and then gracing yourself. I really love it. That's just amazing. I know I have a manifestation exercise that I do several times a week, and it's done ridiculous things in terms of transforming my life. It's just amazing. And so, yeah, I understand that. You know, and even what I've realized is some of the stuff that I wanted to transform, like one example is I wanted to live in a home that was vibrant and happy. And when I wrote that for the first time, my home was quiet like a tomb, right? Like it was very empty. Nobody was there. My daughter was away at school, and I was rattling around in this house by myself. And I had my terrier, and I even felt like my terrier didn't love me that much. Like it was just a rough time, And now, I've transformed the house. I live with a housemate. I have a housemate by choice. My daughter's at university, but lives at home. I put in a suite downstairs. Like we have a very kind of co-housing-y type flowing home, which is something that was like beyond my wildest dreams. And now it's just like, yeah, duh. And sometimes I don't want to talk to anybody. Like I'll get home from work and I'm super tired and I have my morning practice, which is really important to me, and it's quiet time. But beyond that, it's just nice to know when you hear people. For me, I love the sound of other people and they're just saying, hey, how's your day going? Like, or how was your day? Oh, it's asking me how my day is going. That's so cool. That kind of thing. Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, and then Hashondra, people will find you at hashondra.me if they want to explore, because you do life coaching, life consulting. And you mentioned earlier that whether that is someone who wants assistance kind of working through their divorce type situation, or staying in their marriage, or planning Christmas dinner, or whatever the things are, like just whatever it is that they could use some help with. And you'd indicated, which I thought was really great, that you sometimes work with people on a more longer term basis, but sometimes you just help them on a one-off discrete kind of issue, which is really, really great and helpful.
Yes. Sometimes people just don't know how to connect the dots. I'm good at connecting. My degree is in organizational management. So I love organization and just managing things.
Yeah, well, that's great. And sometimes, it's interesting because my legal assistant has that kind of a brain, and that's not my brain at all. That's why I have systems in place to make sure my brain doesn't go off, squirrel, that kind of thing. And then people will find you, Hashondra, at hashondra.me, and that's HASHONDRA.me. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, great. And I'm going to put your link in the show notes. And thank you so much. And thank you for joining me today.
I appreciate you having me. Thank you.
So if you like what you see here, hit the like button, subscribe so you can be kept apprised of all my new content as soon as it's released. And if you want to know more, go to thebetterdivorceproject.com. That's thebetterdivorceproject.com. You'll find tons of treasures on that site, including the ability to sign up for the Better Divorce Project newsletter, where you will find helpful tips, strategies for helping you through your separation and divorce.